What's up, y'all? It's Bryce with Complex Heroes, here with Hunter and Christian behind the camera. Today we're going to be doing timing job and motor mounts on this Audi S5 B9. This also is going to apply to the Audi S4. Leave the RS5 and RS4 engines, 2.9 liter V6s. This guy is coming in for one of the rocker arms actually fell off the camshaft off of its valve. So it's going to get a whole new set of rocker arms. Luckily we caught it before it turned into a bigger issue. As you can see, we kind of have the engine torn apart here. We already have taken off all the stuff like the spark plugs, coil packs, injectors, all of the foam on top, the padding, the vacuum pump, the charge pipe, or like the main feed pipe to the intake manifolds. We've also taken off the rear covers, engine support bars in, and the subframe is dropped about 3 or 4 inches. So we'll just start going through. I'll tell you exactly what we did to get to where we are now and show you how to time this engine properly and put it back together with new rocker arms. So starting off with a little bit of backstory here, we took off this water pump on the passenger side. It does clip into a metal bracket right here. All you have to do is pull this tab back and pull up on it, as well as you do have to disconnect the 2 hose clamps. There's also another one down lower and this connector right here. So after you get the water pump out, you get off this fuel hose loose and pushed back, as well as another aluminum turbo feed line for the coolant that comes off of another pump that's lower down here. That pump can stay on, but the upper pump has to come off. You can get out of your way completely, and you can get this rear cover plate off with the magnets for the adjusters. There's a few more things to take off. The clamps, like these guys right here, you can see these small little clamps. You take a few of those bolts out, as well as this coolant line right here has to be unbolted with 2 T30s and pulled upwards slightly to get this other fuel line clamp. There's a couple more of these clamps underneath a few other coolant lines. Once you can get all those coolant lines out of the way and you can get this fuel line pushed back, you'll have access to both of these rear housings. And that's obviously after you get the complete wiring harness tucked away. On the front here, we do have the vacuum pump removed. There's 3 T30s on that. You can get that vacuum pump off pretty easily. So moving on to the charge pipe here, going to have 3 bolts on each intake manifold, T30 here and here. And you're gonna have also 1 bolt right here underneath the throttle body. Don't forget about that one. You can always break that nipple off. And then you have 3 vacuum nipples right here. So the best way to get this out is when it's in the car, it's gonna sit right here like this. You're gonna pull it out. You're gonna pull this side up. And the best way it's gonna come out is directly in between this hose and the fan. Once you get this guy out, you'll have a bunch of room to start putting your timing tools in. Get these caps off for the cam timing. There's 3 caps and then the vacuum pump. Once you get all that off, you can start putting your timing in, and we'll go over that in a minute when we actually cover the timing part of this. Once you're done with everything on top, you're gonna go ahead and go down to the bottom. First step, before you get underneath the car, you're gonna be putting on the engine stand up top. You're gonna go ahead and get your belts taken off from the AC compressor on the smaller, the main drive belt, as well as the alternator belt, which runs from the water pump to the alternator to the crankshaft. To get off the alternator belt, you need a 16mm open wrench. There is a tensioner that has a 16mm on it. I think it's actually on the pulley. You're gonna turn it to, I believe, the right, and that's gonna release the belt. You can take it off the alternator. The alternator, it's 2 13mm bolts that you take out, and it's actually like a press fit almost. When you tighten those bolts down, they press down these little inserts into the alternator. You're gonna get those 2 off. You're gonna get the ground strap off the back, and obviously before all this work, you are gonna take off the battery ground cable. It's gonna be kind of tight. You're gonna have to pry it out of the bracket on the engine. Once you get it out, you can kind of slip it by this lower radiator hose. To get the compressor off, there's a pulley. It's not a tensioner. It actually has a small spring in it, but it's not like your normal like hydraulic tensioner. It just has 2 positions, loose and tight. It has a T60 on it underneath its cap. You turn it to the left and it detensions this belt. You can get the belt off the compressor. The compressor has 3 bolts, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 on the back. Those 3 are 13mm bolts, as well as a 13mm on the alternator. And then once you get the 3 bolts off of here, you just need to take the connector off, and it can slide right down and out of the way. Once you get the AC compressor out, you can start working on getting your motor mount out. So I'm going to show you exactly how to get these motor mounts out. It's the same on both sides. They're both identical. They're just mirrored. You're going to start off by taking off your 2 13mm. So grab these 2 out. Now I'm going to go over to here where the triple Torx M10 is. I'm trying to show you as best I can. That is going to be located right here. It is a bit of a shallow bolt. It's right behind this bracket, sitting right in here. On both sides, you should be able to get a ratchet in here with the subframe dropped as low as it can go. You get your M10 Now that it's loose, might have to take this strap off, this ground strap that goes to this motor mount, but we'll see. I'll just kind of show you how I get it out in a minute. And now that we got that bolt out, motor mount's now free. Connector's right here. You can see this motor mount was actually leaking actively. Here's the M14 bolt that you need to get out from the mount itself onto the engine. Now that we can get the connector off, just like that, now we gotta see exactly what we need to get off here. Looks like I might need to take the bolt off of this bracket that holds this wiring harness and move it upwards. So broke loose our T30 here, as well as this 13mm right up here. Take that 13mm nut off. Always make sure to put hardware back where it goes and push up and out of our way and get out our engine mount, possibly. Looks like this is the way it's going to come out. Make sure you take this bolt out. That I put it back in so I don't lose it, but it does get in the way. So it looks like this is the way it's coming out. So you can see this motor mount is shot.
So we're going to swap over to the other side here, and this is the first step when it comes to timing this engine. This is after you have the motor mount out. So I'll show you the bracket. It sits in here like this. So after you pull that bracket out, you'll pull it out through here. This is after you have the AC compressor dangling. And the motor mount comes out after the bracket. And then there's this little vacuum canister right here, this thing I'm moving around. If you come in close, deep in here, where I'm pointing, that little 10 mil right there is the crank lock pin. So we had someone turning the crank over while we had a borescope looking in there to find the actual hole. Make sure it was in TDC for the cams. Stuck that in there, made sure we couldn't turn the crank. The crank pin is necessary for doing this. There's no way around it. This is the only way we found that we could do it. All right,
Wow.
we're moving back up top. So this is the kit that we have to time this engine. We're just going to go over how we lock the cam. So we use this plate right here, A for bank 1, B for bank 2. And what found we worked for us is if you look in here, these are actually numbered for the cam locks. They have different lengths.
The ones that are actually different, because there's some that have the little keyway on them. These 5s we found that are going to go on this exhaust side. They don't have a little keyway on them.
Bolt exhaust in this case is 5, and then 7 for the intake, and 6 over here. And the spacers in between right here vary, so you just have to make sure the plate is flat.
This is the counter holding tool along with the part that actually goes into the camshaft adjuster. And this is the actual E24 that goes in, and it actually will break loose that oil control valve. You get this tool and it only goes in one way. Switched over, there's only 3 ways it can, there you go. So that's completely in right there. You can feel that there's almost no play. So it stays right there. Your counter hold tool. These are going to be right hand thread on the oil control valves. You're going to get your E24 on here, like that. The breaker bar on there. It's a 2-man job. And now we're going to go ahead and break this guy loose. Never mind, not gonna break it loose. Just had to get a bigger breaker bar. This one was a little tighter than the other side. So this car is getting new tensioners. And before you take off these camshaft adjusters back here, you do need to make sure that this tensioner is in its service position so that piston doesn't just fly out when you take it off and send parts flying everywhere. We are gonna need to completely remove these 2 T30s. They are not held in with anything internally. Be very careful not to drop these into the engine.
I just shoved a rag in there just to catch them, just in case. It comes out like this.
You can see how
in the service position.
It's the same exact sequence over here. You get your tool in, you get your counter hold, you get your breaker bar in. I already have this one loose. They are all going to be right hand threads, so you're gonna go lefty-loosey on these ones. Now we're getting this passenger side tensioner out. Put another towel in there, just in case one of these bolts wants to drop. Like I said, they're not secured into the tensioners themselves. They're you know, free balling. And that is passenger side tensioner out. Looks to be tensioning. And the chains looked to be good, so I believe it was, as they say, tensioning. Here. So we are currently in the middle of taking off the cam covers with the cams in them. My recommendation for taking these off. Sorry. I'm going to recommend taking almost all the bolts except for 3 down the center and then 1 on each side. Leave those in, get them loose. You're going to grab your pry bar. I pried like right here, and that freed it up for me. He's got like 6 or 7 bolts in. This side I've got about 5 bolts in. Just make sure you keep some of the bolts in so that the actual valve springs don't just shoot the whole cover off. We'll get back to you when we have the covers off.
All right.
Wait, do the shake, do the shake. Oh, nobody has a free hand.
For 100, definitely don't have a free hand.
That boy's knee deep.
Damn, that's a sick shirt, dude. Where'd you get that?
Out of stock.
Out of stock, but we'll order more if you guys want them. They're talking down on my merch game.
We sold out. Can't do nothing about it.
1 coming out. How the cams work?
Oh, so good.
This one was off too. We
Are
got
the
it.
needle bearings in it?
Nope. They're
Oh
gone.
no.
So this roller completely failed on this side as well. I would call that no bueno. So it looks like cylinder 1 and cylinder 4 were the main problem childs, as the rest of them are still on and rolling.
Oh yeah.
Nothing in there. It hurt? Nope. Cam looks fine.
Still got needle bearings in it. This guy was just leaning over right up here. Fell off the valve. Got the borescope in here, and that's what we were able to see. Oh, it spins like shit.
A couple of knee bearings probably fell out. Yeah, a couple of them have blown out. And that's the one that I could see with the borescope. Normally you cannot see any of the other ones. You can't see the whole backside. You can't see these two by putting a borescope in the oil fill cap, and you can't see any of this whole side. Luckily we were able to see that one is bad, so it's easy to quote the customer out. A lot of times with these cars, they start ticking, but the thing is that high pressure fuel pump on this valve cover is very loud from the factory already. So it's hard to distinguish that. So this just has to be a maintenance thing on these cars, especially from the 2018, 2017 years. Here's one of your old rollers. There's a little bit of play in it, but that's pretty normal. I mean, you gotta think oil gets in there as your car's running. You can see how small those needle bearings are compared to the update. You can actually see how large these rollers are on the new bearings and how little play they have compared to the old ones. Just think, this car has like 70,000 miles on it, I think. So this is a maintenance item on the B9 S5 S4s. Do it before they all blow up and cause you to have to buy a new engine. Since the two of the rollers that were bad on this car had lost majority of their small needle bearings in there, we are going to have to drop the lower oil pan in this car to see if we can find those needle bearings, because that's not something I'll be able to sleep at night. This is number 3 that we found that has bearings missing. So right now we're collecting an evidence bag of these guys. I'm going to leave out the ones that are really bad, put the ones that are okay in here. So damage report, this is the passenger side valve cover. The camshafts are inside the valve cover on this car. And so it looks to me like we had the worst failure on the passenger side. Looks like none of the roller bearings are left, and it has scored the camshaft and done a decent amount of damage. This exhaust camshaft on our passenger side is bad and will need to be replaced, so we're gonna have to wait for that. We're gonna get that from the dealership. I'm gonna have to call them tomorrow. It is Sunday. This is the other one right here. You can see the chipping in it. And one on this exhaust camshaft right here. You can see, you can get it a little closer right here. It's more on the tip here, possibly, but it is scored just like how this is. It did damage to this side too. Probably going to be people who say that you can run that, but I would never run this in something that's not mine. So it won't run exactly the way it came from factory. It is worse on the direct tip of it, so we're going to have to wait for 2 exhaust cams, and we do have all the rollers, so we'll put all the rollers in, cover it up, get the exhaust cams, and we'll get back to you when we have those. New day, new hat, maybe new shirt. I actually think this is the same shirt I was running the other day. I washed it. Anyways, so starting on taking apart these camshaft holders, valve covers, whatever you want to call them. We're going to take everything off so we can clean it all off. Step 1 is going to be taking this high pressure fuel pump off with a M10, 2 of them. Comes out, has an O-ring. There's not too much pressure on it as long as you take the engine apart in the low lift setting of this camshaft. This is facing downwards. So I'd say if this is facing upwards on your car, make sure you just turn this intake cam around so that there's no lift going on there. Cam sensors we're going to take out, and then these are actually like a variable valve. I think variable valve timing or variable valve lift. They're solenoids. So we're going to pop these guys out and make sure you put them back in the exact same spot. I'll get back to you when we take these out. They're pretty simple to take out. For anybody freaking out that this is sitting directly on like a mating surface, it's not. It's sitting on these caps and these back here right here. None of the lobes are touching, so we're good. Before you flip it over, take a magnet in here and grab out your follower. I just like to mark my position here, just so I know that it's going back in the exact same way it came out. Take a flathead screwdriver. We are going to be replacing these upper guides. So grab your flathead, pry upwards, just like that. Has a little hole. So since this thing isn't under any like spring pressure, like if valves run underneath it, you can kind of just take this off however you want. I still go around sequence from middle to center, even though you don't really need to. There's probably a way to do it, but it's like at the end of the day, it's an engine. Engines don't go together the way an engine don't go together. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that'll make sense to people.
picture before you take it apart. All these cam caps are going to have numbers on them and letters. When you're replacing the camshafts, you want to make sure you're taking note of where these lobes are facing, because you're going to need to put the new camshaft in the same exact way this one came out. After you get all these guys off, I like to rock them off like this so that the dowels will come loose. Keeping them in order here. One thing to take note of on the intake cam on both sides, be careful of your end play bearing almost. It interfaces into the camshaft right here. Make sure that the camshaft can't move side to side. That right there is our camshaft. Decent chunk missing out of it right here. And we have our new one right here. I would say make sure your part numbers are going to match up before you put anything back together. Here at the bottom it's really small, but you can see it. It says 109 102 EP. 109 102 EP. You got the right camshaft to put it back in. I checked that on the other side as well. On these Audis, they do have these Teflon seals. I am replacing the ones on the intake cams. This is the part number for the gasket for the camshaft that go Teflon seals. Always, 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 whenever you take these off, replace these gaskets. They're super cheap and very easy to replace. I'm going to go ahead and clean up this tray. A little bit of brake clean. Make sure you take this guy out and put it back on your cam before you flip it over. Because if you lose that, I'm telling you right now, not going to be a good day. Back from cleaning, for the most part, I used a nylon brush. It takes a little bit longer than using a wire brush, but doesn't send wire everywhere. When I did that, I actually was covering all the main oil galleys right here and there. Just make sure you're covering all those up. The biggest thing is that you just don't want chunks on the inside. You're going to be able to get lodged in like the oil filter, oil pickup tube, whatnot. Looks pretty good. With some assembly lube, you're just going to go around. Same thing with this guy. Make sure you're wearing some clean new gloves. Make sure that it spins. I do like to line up the vector rings 180 out from each other, and those guys up 180 degrees out from each other. This is our new intake camshaft. Brand new, looking good. Get a clean towel here. Give this thing a wipe down and go through and lube up all the point contact. Make sure this thing's nice and lubed up. Grab your rectangle seals. That's how I like to do it. Just be very careful with how far you're spreading these out, not giddy. And then you're going to go ahead and grab the top one, get them 180 degrees out from each other. Set this guy in now. Make sure they're completely coated all the way around. Before you put on your camshaft caps, you'll want to put on that new. Not just that. Press in, nice tight into cover. Part number on this one, 103650. And now you can start putting on your cam caps. Too much bearing assembly grease. To nice and tight with a couple of dowels right here. Now we're going to tighten these guys down. I'm still waiting on the torque spec for these. I believe it's going to be about 10 Newton meters. These by hand. Getting the timing plate put back on this side. I made marks here and there. Get them lined back up. Everything's back in time. I'll torque these guys down when I know the torque spec. So before we put anything back together, first step is to prep your surfaces. In the workbook for Audi, it says to use a nylon bristle brush just like this. You're going to take your surface from looking like that to nice and clean. Nothing crazy, just get the majority of that RTV off and then go around with some brake clean off any oils or grease. Make sure you clean off the backside right here as well. You're going to clean that up with like a razor blade, and then we can get everything put back together. Already got this side done. The Audi workbook calls for a 3mm bead of sealant, which is about there. So I laid that down a little earlier before I did the other one. We're using Mopar. It's tested on Project Farms, one of the best RTVs on the market. Not even just for gluing, but also for sealing. So.
And it's cheap.
And it's cheap. I think this bottle is about $13 at the local Dodge dealer. I start laying this on. At your edge. Super imperative that we get these guys snapped in like that, and we also are making sure that they're on their valves. Soak these guys in oil overnight just to make sure that they're not going to have any issues. Torque spec for these are 8 Newton meters. I'll flash the correct sequence on the screen. If you didn't take a picture, all these top ones are 10 mils and this middle ones are also 10 mils. We got all these torqued down to 8 Newton meters in order. And now we're going to go ahead and do a 90-degree turn in the same exact order, and then this guy will be torqued down to spec. We have our adjusters here. I already have the other adjusters put on. These are the arrows for lining up the adjusters. The reason why they have arrows is because they're actually oval. In the workshop manual, it does say this is on bank 1, the passenger side bank. There's lines that you line up the adjusters to, and on bank 2, these lines are right here. All you have to do is line up the yellow line here that I made, which has the arrow, and you line them up to your head. That'll have the engine, for the most part, in time. On the back side of these adjusters, you do want to make sure that these are as clean as possible, so you want to get some brake clean and a towel, nice clean cloth, and wipe down on the inside of these diamond-coated washers. I've got our camshaft adjusters over here on bank 2 on. I have our yellow marks lined up within our range here. I did mark these aluminum risers with a yellow paint pen. They're actually on the inside here, right behind the adjuster. Lines up within the range, and then there's another one that faces this way over here on bank 2. Now we're going to get our oil control valves threaded in. So right now I have the tensioner in. Torque spec for this tensioner is going to be 9 Newton meters. Torque spec for these guys, the camshaft oil control valves, is going to be 30 Newton meters. You have to make sure that you are counter holding it with your counter hold tool that we used in the beginning of the video. And then you're going to come back to this one that you started at and do 35 degrees, and then do 35 degrees on this one. Now we're going to come around with our inspection mirror and just make sure that the timing chain is completely on its rails before we pull the tensioner. Grenade pin. Pre-holding it here, torquing it to 30 Newton meters. Now we're going to move on to torquing the camshaft adjusters the rest of the way. You torque them to 30 Newton meters, you spin the engine over twice, you make sure everything's still in time, and if everything is still in time, then you're going to go ahead and put 35 degrees more on each of the 4. Now we're going to set these to 35 degrees more. Torque wrench for angling here. Okay. A little easier when you have somebody to counter hold for you, but right now Hunter's currently working on another car. We are trooping. 35 degrees. That's never coming back. Yay! 35 degrees. 35. Alrighty, we got these rear timing covers back in place. So the torque spec for those two are going to be 9 Newton meters for all those T30s back there. Moving on to getting our vacuum pump reinstalled. I got it nice and cleaned up. Got all of our plugs put back in. Now we're going to go ahead and get our crankshaft locking tool plug put back in. Put a little bit of PTFE sealant on the threads, just because there is no O-ring on this from the looks of it. And we're going to go ahead and lower the engine down, put the motor mounts in, and go there. Now we're going to get these 3 tightened down after we got our crank lock plug. I put that in T45. I torqued that guy down to 30 Newton meters. And now we're going to get these guys tightened down. 2 10 mils on top and 1 T30 on the bottom. One here and one there. Both are the 10 millimeter nuts, and the T30 is right here. Just like this. Now we're going to get these 4 bolts screwed in by hand, and we're going to torque these guys down to spec, which I'll flash on the screen right now. Just got the AC compressor mostly bolted in. There's one here, one back, on top. I already explained that earlier. These guys are going to get torqued down to, I'll flash it on the screen. We have the motor mount in and bolted down. We're getting our alternator put back in now. I got it slipped past this lower coolant hose, and we're going to get it put back in with the 2 13 millimeter bolts. And then we're going to tighten her down, get her connected, and then put the power cable back on it on the back side. Now we got to get the belt on the crankshaft here, get this routed, and now we can get the larger belt here routed. This belt's going to go over the water pump and alternator and a couple of pulleys. I'll flash the belt routing on the screen because it's not really something I can just show you guys. are doing a oil flush on this thing, 2 oil changes, and then another one in like 50 miles. Now that this is all cleaned up, we can go ahead and get our oil pan RTV'd up and up in here and get on with our lives. All right, let's go.
I'm going to show y'all how to service some injectors here real quick, assuming the rail is already off the car. Come in here, give this guy a wobble until it comes out. What I like to do is take a razor blade and cut a relief cut in the Teflon seal, take a pick, break it off, come on top. This is what the new ones look like. This is the part number right here. Top O-ring off, top spacer off. Crazy stuff here. Circles facing down. The spacer back on. Top O-ring. We actually work on a lot of BMW stuff, so we have a M54 injector puller and installer tool, and the Teflon seal stretch thingy works. This guy. We'll use these to compress them before we put them into the head. Grip. Push it to the edge. This guy. Line it up, plop it on, just like that. Gotta put it back in. Done.
So after you get your foam installation in, you're gonna go ahead and put back in your fuel injectors after replacing all the seals. Service manual says to lightly oil these O-rings with clean engine oil. Make sure that you have all 3 of them compressed down on your Teflon seal compressor. You're going to put these guys in, start all your bolts, get them down to 5 Newton meters, which is the first stage. And then you're going to go up to 9 Newton meters. You're going to do another pass with 9 Newton meters. That's just what the manual says to do. You're at 9 Newton meters, you are good to go. You have your injectors installed. Took off the throttle body and the adapter. Gives you more space right here to get this guy in while the vacuum pump is in. You just slip it down like this. Now it's under the vacuum pump. And get these vacuum lines out of the way. Just like that. So today, we're finishing up. We have the wiring harness installed completely. Everything just lays out properly where it goes. I put on the charge pipe. Everything goes back in place. The main thing I want to show you here is after you plug in this connector between the sub harness, put that guy back down here, grips up there. You got your color coded connectors here. Black, green, purple, blue, white. And you just got to start with black. Just like that. Alright, so we got all the coil packs plugged in, everything's plugged in except for our injectors. We have all of our fuel lines tight. We have all the coolant pipes and hoses plugged in and bolted down. The DME is plugged in, everything's plugged in. Everything's closed off except for the intake. We're going to prime the engine by unplugging the injectors. So far from the looks of it, our seals are holding up on all 60 injectors. And so let's go ahead and prime it. So there's going to be a little bit of ticking noise at the first prime. Just prime it 4 or 5 times. Make sure you have your battery charger on it while you're doing so, up until the point that it's running that you can take it off. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug in the injectors because we've primed it probably like 6 times now. Make sure that oil's getting everywhere. As well as you want to look underneath, make sure that there's no coolant after you fill up the coolant. There's no coolant or oil on the ground. Literally. No. She's purring like a kitten, brother. Other than that, subframe motor mounts will get torqued down, and then we can take this thing up for a little test drive. The high pressure fuel pump isn't as loud as people say it is, so if you're hearing a loud tick, it's not the high pressure fuel pump. This is about as loud as it gets. So anything louder than that, you're definitely looking at a rocker arm job.
Always remember, folks, torque your wheels.
Just come straight back with it.
Sounds good.
Goddamn right it does.
Well,
Been waiting forever to do that.
well, Audi is gone.
Happy customer.
If you like the video, go ahead and subscribe. We mainly work on these.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and like the video. Subscribe, guys. Go ahead and make sure you guys are liking and subscribing, though. Okay? If you think I'm a bad mechanic, leave a comment.
I want to
If
see
you think
it.
I'm a terrible mechanic, leave a comment. If you think I'm a great mechanic, leave a comment.
If you're VAG Technic.
If you are a VAG Technic, leave a comment.
All right, next up.
Going in.
Going in.
Coming out, going in.
See you in the next.